and I am going to get started. It's 7:01, and it looks like everyone made it in. So good evening, and welcome to the Spiritual Frontiers Fellowship March presentation. This month we have Sharrie Gaines, Revelation to Humanity, an Introduction to the Urantia Book. So thank you for joining us this evening. If you're here for the first time, welcome. And we're glad that if you're here for the first time, welcome. And we're glad that you found us. And if you've been with us before, welcome back to the SFF community. My name is Smith Prim. I am the co-chairman for the Spiritual Frontiers Fellowship, along with Catherine Smart. Catherine is also our writer and our editor, so you can thank her for the wonderful information that we get on Constant Contact and our emails and on our Facebook. Kim Kasdorf is our media director. Thank you, Kim, for being our media director and making the fantastic recordings that we post on YouTube. And Eileen Jenna, who is not with us tonight, is our program coordinator, and she does an excellent job at bringing speakers like Sharrie Gaines with us tonight. So I just would like you to know that SFF is here. You are the reason that we're here. Our nonprofit, all volunteer run organization is here to help you develop and enhance your spiritual, mystical, and metaphysical awareness and consciousness. And the way that we do that is by sponsoring programs like the one tonight, and they are designed to facilitate your personal growth and development and a holistic and spiritual approach to health and living. I would like to make you aware that the program is being recorded. And so if you don't want to be recorded or visible on the recording, just turn your camera off. That's easy enough to do. Let's see, what else do we need to do? Before I introduce our speaker, I usually like to do a quick 3 breath meditation. So if you could join me with that, it's just going to be 3 simple breaths to release and bring in energy. And if you could, just join me by closing your eyes a little and taking a deep breath in. And when you exhale any remaining tensions from the day or anything that just doesn't serve you for the purpose of this presentation. And on your second breath in, breathe in love and light, and to replace any negative energies that you have released. And exhale, releasing the rest of the energy. And lastly, we'll do one more breath to bring in more love and light. And exhale and be relaxed. I told you it wouldn't take long. So tonight we have Sharrie Gaines with us. Get ready to embark on a journey of ongoing discovery as Sharrie presents the Urantia Book and its uplifting, mind-expanding, and thought-provoking narrative. The Urantia Book was the foundation started in 1955, and the Urantia Book provides profound insights into the origin, history, and destiny of humanity. It unravels the mysteries surrounding God, life in the inhabited universe, the past, and the future of our world, and presents an inspiring account of life and the teachings of Jesus. The Urantia Book holds a key to a fresh perspective on timeless inquiries, offering not just answers, but a pathway to personal peace and understanding. So I'm looking forward to our presenter tonight, Sharrie. She will guide us through the book, and she'll give us additional insights that she has discovered in her reading and working with the Book of Urantia. So at this time, I'd like to introduce Sharrie. I wanted to mention one other thing about our presentation. Sharrie will present until around 8:25, and then we'll take a 5 to 7 minute break, and we'll come back and we'll do our question and answer, which is a unique, and it's only available during our live presentations. We will have our presentation on YouTube in a week or two, but it won't include the question and answer. So at this time, I'd like to introduce Sharrie Gaines. Sharrie.
Hi, thank you, Smith. Thank you very much. I'm so glad to see everyone here. A lot of folks I know and a lot of folks are new friends. So I'm so happy you had enough interest in this funny word, Urantia, to come and want to know a little bit more about it. I will, first of all, I just want to say that I'm a little bit of a kindergartner with doing a PowerPoint slideshow. So we're all going to be real tolerant of me tonight, aren't we? And Smith's going to help me and Kim's going to help me. But anyway, we'll get there. We'll get there one way or the other. Believe me, I can talk a long time about the Urantia book, but the slides are going to be very useful and very helpful, and will be some nice visual aids for the material. I'm going to get a little bit into my spiritual journey story in just a moment, but just to kind of let you know who I am locally here in the Raleigh area. First of all, probably like everyone here on this screen, I've been on a quest for truth, for the big questions: who are we, why are we here, what's my purpose? Really, actually, since a pretty young age. I remember feeling rather awed in my family because of that. Again, I think I'm in good company here because of that. But the bigger questions of life just were always underneath the surface. And so that certainly has led me to many, many, many spiritual and philosophical paths over 40 plus years. And I've investigated a lot of, like I said, I'll get into my spiritual story a little bit. So let me set that aside. What I do right now and what I've been doing for 25 years is I'm a holistic practitioner. I'm a currently retired yoga teacher. I taught Hatha yoga for 22 years here in the Raleigh area in many venues, corporately, privately, weekly classes. And I also have had a private healing practice for 25 years, offering reflexology, Reiki, and what's turning into more and more, I kind of call it soul conversations. Sometimes folks just come in and we just talk at the level of soul. And I try to be a deep listener and reflector because I know that the wisdom we all have for our lives is within ourselves. So that's what I'm doing now. That's what I've been doing and what I've been evolving in my professional life. And like I say, I'll get to just a minute. I've got a slide to give you all a little laugh about my my spiritual journey. So first of all, and you can just flick your hand up if you've got your video on. Have any of you here ever heard of the Urantia book before? Some of you through me, some of you not through me. Okay, great. I'm glad to see that. It's a little daunting when you first pick it up. It's 2,097 pages of very dense, highly elevated material about, as Smith said in his introduction, in a nutshell, it gets into the origin, history, and destiny of humanity, of the cosmos, of that which we call God, of all of the celestial beings. It's one of the most incredible things I have ever encountered in my life, which is why I'm here today. But it can be daunting. You can look at the book and say, and the print's real small, and you can look at it and go, no way, Jose, I want a shortcut. So there aren't really any spiritual shortcuts. Some of you have found that out by now. But I hope tonight will give you a taste. What I've tried to do is give you all a taste of what I perceive and a lot of my Urantia community perceives as some of the really main topics of focus in the book, what they're really trying to tell us in this 2,097 pages. So with that said, and like Smith said, please, if you've got some questions for later, jot a note, write them down, and so you can remember, because I'm going to be throwing a lot at you. Some of my slides are definitely going to be a little text heavy. Don't let that intimidate you. It's kind of hard not to include the amazing descriptive words that are used in this book. So I had to err on the side of a little heavy wording on some of the on some of the slides. All righty. So I'm going to start my screen share here, and we'll get rolling. Okay. What are you seeing on the screen there, Smith? The full slide?
Yes, it is good.
It's good?
Yep.
Yay. Okay. So this is my introductory slide. We don't have to spend too much time on that. The topic tonight is Revelation to Humanity, an introduction to the Urantia Book. And give us a little idea of what you're going to see tonight and what we're going to cover. A little bit, as I said, about my spiritual journey, what the Urantia Book is, what it contains. And I was really intrigued about why I was given last night. Spirit gave me to say, why now? Because, you know, things that are given of a revelatory nature, there are very specific points in human history when they need to be given to our planet. Who is God? Ooh, that's a big question, right? Who are we? Our spirit helpers. Religion, big topic in the Urantia Book. Prayer and worship, a little bit different than what most of us have been taught in our churches. And the whole last part of the book is what I like to call the biography, the actual biography of Jesus of Nazareth, from birth all the way through. Daily life, his siblings, his family. It's an amazing story. If you have any desire to read that, it's amazing. So what was his mission? What is the religion of Jesus, not the religion about Jesus? Big distinction in this book. He instituted a women's corps. That's not public knowledge typically. And he actually trained women to become teachers and ministers. And then life after death. That's a question a lot of us have a lot of different thoughts about. Some of us may have had near-death experiences, but I'm going to share what the Urantia Book is giving to us about this topic. And then a little slide to finish up is what our challenge and opportunity is with this material. And I've got hopefully a nice little resource page and my email address so you can get in touch with me, because I can send you a copy of this. I can email you a copy of this. All righty, let's begin our journey here. I told you you'd need a laugh. Okay, you can see those three pictures? All right, this is little Sharrie. Back in the day when mothers used to give their children permanents. She wanted curly hair, so I look like Bozo, but that's okay. This was Easter time. I think I'm around 6 or 7 years old here, but I was raised in not a Southern, but a Northern Baptist church. And Easter was the big time, as some of you all might have had this in your youth of dressing up for Easter. But I threw this in here to let you know that my Baptist church growing up was extremely important to me. It was a very safe, comforting place. I was very fortunate to have ministerial leadership that taught a God of love and not a God of fear and judgment. I was very fortunate with that. That's not always the case. And I really, as far back as I can remember, Jesus especially, I just always had this sweetness about Jesus, because that's how Jesus was presented to me. The loving Jesus, the Jesus cradling little lambs and little children. And as a child, that was very comforting and very safe for me. And I'm so glad that I had that established in my childhood. But of course, life moves on. We grow up, we get into high school, we get into college, which is when I sort of broke away from my traditional Baptist roots and was, sowing my wild oats, maybe not too wild, but a little wild. And I was, starting on a career. I was establishing myself in the world, the professional world. And so church itself kind of dropped away, but those big questions never did. They never did. And I definitely want to share with you that for some strange reason, and all of you here know how spirit works in such miraculous synchronistic ways, but precisely on my 33rd birthday, I was married at the time, and I woke up, I went to the kitchen for my first cup of coffee and breakfast with my husband, and he said, "Happy birthday, Sharrie." And I just started crying. I couldn't stop crying. And he said, "What's wrong?" And this came out of my mouth, literally, literally. He said, "Are you okay?" And I said, "I don't know who I am. I don't know why I'm here. And I have no idea who or what God is." So I call that a redirection. It kind of threw me. It was like Spirit said, "Whoo, we need to get you back on a spiritual path some way, somehow." So, um, you know, getting those spiritual nudges is not always comfortable. Spirit is often pushing us out of our comfort zone so we'll grow. In fact, that's often the only way we will. So that's what happened to me at age 33. And around that time, I started discovering, some of you all know the Dancing Moon here in Raleigh. And my dear friend, Cherry Lee, that owns the Dancing Moon, is with us tonight. So I'm so glad she's here. I discovered metaphysics. I discovered the Unity Church and the Unity path of positive, practical Christianity. I began practicing yoga, and that led me to Eastern thought, Eastern teaching, Buddhism, the Vedas, the Bhagavad Gita. And when I go deep, I go deep. My bookshelves attest to that. So I really did a deep dive into Eastern New Thought and metaphysical seeking. And that was all when, I was developing my skills as a healing practitioner. I was getting Reiki certified. I was teaching yoga. So that middle picture is really where I've been on my path for more than 30 years. And then about 6 years ago, a couple of years before the 2020 pandemic, big global shutdown, I was starting to feel that restlessness again. My daily meditations felt empty. My practices felt dry. I was faithful and devoted to them, but there was just a hollowness in my spiritual life. And it was kind of disconcerting because I was, quote, doing all the right things. And I felt like I had a real solid spiritual practice and spiritual life, but it felt really empty. So fast forward to March of 2020, I had been given a copy of the Urantia book by a good friend months before, and I thought, well, we can't go out of our house. I might as well crack the spine of this big old book. So that's where it started, March of 2020. And so for the last 4 years, I have been literally almost constantly immersed in study, reading, courses, study groups, conferences. When I first started reading it, actually my brain was hurting because it was so expansive, but I couldn't put it down. And every bone in my body, every ounce of my soul just said, "This is truth. You've got to keep going." May not affect everyone like that, but it sure grabbed me. And I'm sure that a lot of the previous, my spiritual studies previously certainly prepared or brought me to this place where I could receive it. So this last picture was taken last summer at the Body, Mind, Spirit Expo. Some fake wings there, but I really feel like I have more of a foundation in my life now. I feel like I have some clarity. I feel like I have more meaning, value, and purpose because of this material and the community that I'm involved in. So, yeah, I put on there, hopefully I'm moving deeper inward, upward, and Godward in love and service, because that's what it's all about. So that's my little story. And some of this was in the introductory event promo that you've received, but just take a glance at this slide and see if you've ever asked yourself these questions, even if it was a fleeting thought, even if it was just a fleeting thought. We all have different spiritual and religious backgrounds and paths. So if you look at the second part of this, what I have, these bullet points that I've put down here are really the essence of what the Urantia book contains. And unifying science, religion, and philosophy is, again, a theme that they talk about quite a bit through here. And it addresses many aspects of that. Because sometimes those three big subjects feel like they're at odds with each other. And this material weaves it together in a very skillful way. It does get into, the inhabited universe. We'll get into that just a little bit. I'm not going to go real deep into the science, but if you've got an interest in science and the geology of our planet, even the geography of, the shifting ice ages, it's all in there. It's amazing. The teachings of Jesus are presented, as I said earlier. The nature and attributes of what we call God is, again, I've never seen this anywhere else, anything I've ever come across. And I have really developed a much deeper understanding of the value that each and every individual one of us has to our Creator. That's been really healing and helpful. So let's go on. The answers, as I implied just in the last slide, or at least some pretty good theories, if you want to call them that, I feel like it's truth, can be found in this 2,097 page book, which, by the way, is available free to download and listen to on multiple Urantia websites. So you don't just have to read the book. So what is this book? What is this book? It does have a foreword, which I'll get into in just a minute, but it's a series of papers. So they're called papers rather than chapters. And back in the early 1920s and 30s in Chicago, Dr. William Sadler and his wife Lena, he was a surgeon, he was a psychiatrist, he was a real Renaissance man. He was a professor of graduate studies at the Chicago medical schools, and anyway, he'd been all over the world. But he had I'm just going to be very transparent here. A woman brought her husband to see him as a patient because this man, her husband, was talking in his sleep. And he was saying things that she'd never heard of before. And he had no memory of it when he woke up. So, long story short, the sleeping subject, as he's called, was brought in and agreed to sleep under the supervision of Dr. Sadler and his team. And they started taking dictation, and that's how the papers began. And then as things rolled on over the first 2 decades, more and more information was coming through. And then finally, the celestials, they call them supermortal beings, which is a little different than celestial, but they're, some of them are a little closer to Earth and some of them are really in different dimensions of existence. But all of these authors and all of these revelators were giving different papers. They were all authored by different people, some of them in groups. But they finally, kind of halfway through this sleeping subject experience, said, you all aren't asking hard enough questions. What do you really want to know from us? We're here. We're an open book. We've been given permission from the Most High to share some pretty amazing, startling revelations to your planet. Ask us what you will. So that's when a forum was started with a lot of different handpicked people from the Sadlers that were interested in doing this. And this went on for 2 decades until finally it came to an end. 196 papers were finished. And then it was it was organized, it was scrutinized. And then in 1955, the paper or the book was finally published. And there are absolutely no names associated with the sleeping subject. There are no celebrity names associated with this. The revelators did not want this material to be associated in any way with creating a celebrity cult around anybody. That also makes it quite real to me, very real to me. So the first part, it's in 4 parts. The first part describes deity, the central universe, and the super universes. And then it goes into the local universe, and which is the universe our planet's in, the history of our planet, of Urantia, which is the name of our planet. That's when you get into a lot of geology and science and ice ages and the history of the races. That's the history of our planet. That's quite fascinating. And then the 4th and last part is completely devoted to the life and teachings of Jesus. You still with me? Still awake? Good, good, good. I know it's a lot. I know it's a lot, but believe me, I was telling Smith earlier that my challenge and my task was to take this big amount of paper and try to call out what I felt like were the most compelling and relevant pieces of information and put it in this presentation. So it was a labor of love, believe me. So here we go. This gives you a little more detail. And I put this quote up here because I think it's amazing. You know, why the revelation and why now? Well, here's an answer. To expand cosmic consciousness and enhance spiritual perception in a time when, and I love this, the social ship of established tradition has begun its cruise upon the high seas of evolutionary destiny. It's quite poetic, isn't it? And to stabilize the ideals of mankind during these dangerous times of transition from one phase of civilization to another. Now remember, this was originally coming through in the early decades of the 20th century, right? It was finally published after 2 major world wars, 1955, 2 major world wars, and just at the beginning when science technology was getting ready to just skyrocket. You know, from the 50s till today, humanity's never seen such rapid evolution, which has been good, and it's also thrown us into a tailspin. So stabilizing the ideals, not the ideas, but the ideals. What are our highest ideals for ourselves? Okay, to stabilize those during these dangerous times of transition, so we don't, go off on a side road and get really lost and that's happening. We're seeing so much anxiety. We're seeing so much feelings of depression and anxiety, and unfortunately, especially among young people, suicide rates are going up. And I'm pretty sure all the revelators knew this was going to happen. So that's part of why this material was given. So it does contain a small foreword. The foreword is often considered one of the most challenging things to read, but it's there for a reason. And it contains a lot of material about God, the I am concept, and about universe reality. And then, as I was saying a little earlier, part 1, and what I did was pull out just a few bullet points of some of the topics in each of these parts. So there is, in this cosmology, there is a central universe. And the very middle of the central universe is, now they're using language we can understand, is where paradise resides. There is a literal paradise. And then around the central universe are 7 super universes. And within those, super universes are local universes. Okay, just kind of see that trickle down theory there. And it describes a lot of the celestial beings and the different spirits and the different personalities and what their roles are. Part 2 is about our local universe. It talks a lot about evolution. many inhabited worlds, many tens and hundreds of thousands of inhabited worlds in our local universe. We are not alone. And one of the more interesting papers that people are drawn to in this book is there's a paper actually called Government on a Neighboring Planet, on a Nearby Neighboring Planet. It's an interesting to read. They're just a little more evolved than us. They're still not where they need to be, and we aren't either. We're kind of one of the most backward planets in our local universe. I hope that doesn't surprise anybody, but it's true. But we're getting there. We're getting there. So, there's a real interesting discussion on energy, mind, and matter in that as well. And part 3 is the history of our planet. Again, it gets into geology, astronomy, where we are. They talk about some of the constellations. For those of you that are real interested in sort of that cosmology scientific of our local universe, you find this paper very interesting. Adam and Eve, the story is quite different in this book. Wish I had time to really dive into that, but I don't. They were actually sent here on a mission to upstep our physical biology. They were beings of, they actually came here and were a material body was created for them, and to actually bring children into the world and then mate with all the other people existing that were here, because their DNA was so much more advanced than ours. But they boo-booed. There was a little, they went off course a little bit. So that put us behind a little bit too. But there wasn't a snake in an apple. Just throw that out of your mind. That was a lovely myth, and it was poetic, but according to this revelation, that's not how it all happened. It talks beautifully about our guardian angels, and we all have a pair of them. A pair. They work in pairs. And even though it's not literally male and female, the energy of our guardian angels, one is more yin and one is more yang. So energetically, they balance each other out. One is more active and one is more receptive. I think that's amazing. I think that's beautiful. And those angels are going to go with us if we choose to go, if we choose the journey. They're going to go escort us and be a part of our life all the way up to paradise. So we're going to enjoy getting to know them. And then the origins of our personal indwelling spirits of God, and then the evolution of religion, which is quite fascinating, starting with the most primitive worship of fire. It goes that far back, and how religion has evolved and has gone through many iterations and superstitions, etc., etc. And then one of the most beloved parts of this book is the life and teachings of Jesus. A lot of books have been written about his missing years. I myself have read quite a few where he traveled to India and he did this. According to the Urantia material, he didn't actually get to India, but for a year, he traveled with a wealthy Indian merchant and his son all through the Mediterranean. He was the tutor and the interpreter. And so he got to spend a whole year with a father and son from India, and he got a lot of, he absorbed a lot of their beliefs and spiritual practices that way. It talks about his adult life, his public work, his teaching missions. You will get biographies of all of the 12 original apostles. They were married, they had children. It was really interesting. And then there's a whole section on the different main world religions in there and their evolution. And the gospel and faith of Jesus is, as I mentioned before, can't go too deep into this, but let's see. After Jesus left the planet and his teaching and his message were starting to be spread, we know that most of the New Testament was actually written by Paul. And so Christianity is often called Paulianity for that reason, because he didn't actually meet Jesus, but he did have a conversion experience, and he did know some of the apostles. So, but there was a compromise made in early Christianity, and I hope I'm not offending anybody, because there's no, absolutely, I'm just taking this from the book. But what the Urantia book says about Christianity is that it was taken off in a wrong direction by making it into, basically, and these are my words, a celebrity cult about Jesus. And so it became more about Jesus. It was a religion about Jesus, not the religion of Jesus, which were his teachings and his way of life. So that's a huge, huge distinction in this story that I hope might inspire some of you to want to know who this the earth life of this Son of Man and Son of God is. Yeah, there's some crossover. Some of the stories made it into the New Testament, but there's a whole lot here there's a whole lot that's been missing that didn't make it in, and this fleshes out his whole life. Now, one more thing I want to tell you about who Jesus is in the Urantia book is he came here on a bestowal mission. He was required to make 7 bestowal missions to 7 different planets in his local universe, which is our local universe. He is called the creator's son of our universe. So he's kind of the sovereign ruler and administrator of our universe, of which our planet is only one. But we are considered, cosmically, we are considered incredibly, incredibly graced by him choosing our backward, primitive planet 2,000 years ago to bring more light to the planet, because what he did on our planet was actually broadcast out to every other planet in the universe. So what he did here definitely affected us, but it was also broadcast all out into our local universe. So that, my Christian traditional stories, were like, whoa. So, that's why I'm showing you, my mind was just like, wow, I really have to expand myself to take all this in. So again, if I'm throwing a lot at you, just take what sticks. And when this presentation's over and in the ongoing weeks and months and possibly years, you can pick and choose what you'd like to get into. So that's a quick look at 2,097 pages. And I wanted to just throw this up here because it almost seems a little arrogant, doesn't it, for a book to say, well, we're going to tell you who God is. But it's not. There are 5 papers in the first part of the book completely devoted to explaining the nature of the words God, deity, creator. And these are some of the names and attributes that the Urantia book talks about. I've pulled just a few out, but the first one, as you can read, is the universal and true spiritual father of all universes in creation and those now forming, because there are many, many, many universes still in the primitive gaseous stages that are forming way out on the edges. So you can read about that as well. He's also lovingly referred to as the first source and center of all things and beings. The father and bestower of all personality. That's something different as well. Our personality, we often think of it as our character, but our characters are what we have inherited and developed in response to our environment. Our personality, according to this book, is actually an actual immortal bestowal directly from God. And they're each unique, and we will recognize each other when we're in a different form because of that personality. He's considered eternal, never ending, never beginning, infinite, creator, controller, and upholder. Some of these designations are not new to some of you. Just some new, maybe some new ways to think about God. I like this. He's changeless in the midst of change. Interestingly enough, this next to the last bullet point, he shares the consciousness of all of our experiences and actually participates in our lives of immaturity and imperfection. So through his vast cosmic organizational organization of different levels of himself and different levels of his like stepping down to participate in our lives. He can know what we experience. And he does that primarily by giving us a fragment of his actual self, our indwelling spirit.
Really small one.
Can everyone mute? Oh, thank you. Yeah. And then he does have a plan for every being that chooses to have this perfect ascension career. It's an evolving and ascending career of increasing perfection and universe service. So really, all of these spiritual pulls and tugs that we all have in many different forms and in many different ways, I've come to believe now that really what that tug is it's like a homing device. It's like I'm your truth, I'm your reality, and I'm always beeping and GPSing you because I want you to become like me. I want you to become like me. And I want you to live with me eternally on paradise. Now, all that sounds a little hokey to some people, but if you choose to read about this in more depth, I think you'll understand it has a much higher meaning than some myth and fantasy realm. So I felt I absolutely had to talk about that. And some people are a little uncomfortable with God being called a father. And I was all up in arms about, the whole gender thing when I first started reading this book. But they also get into the mother aspect of God, so not to worry. But in broad general terms, thinking of God as a father is really the easiest way for us and the most intimate way for us to connect. God is mother and father, but overarchingly, God operates more as a loving, protective, all-wise, guiding father for all of his creation. I have made my peace with that. I'll just leave it at that. I've totally made my peace with that. And who are we? Some people would not want to hear this, but again, in great detail, in great depth, in every epoch from the time this life was ready, this planet was ready to actually support life, is talked about in this book. So we are called animal origin beings of evolutionary life processes. And how evolution is described is it's orderly and controlled. There is an architect behind it. It's not random. We're not random, accidental chaos, that we just, boom, humans just happen to randomly evolve out of all this mess. No, there was a plan. Evolution is a cosmic technique of growth. Evolution is creativity in time. I really love that definition. It is intelligently planned, and evolution is still actively and adaptively in progress on this planet. And evolution is the rule of human development, okay? So we are here to evolve. We are here to evolve and learn and grow. We are an experiential species. It's the only way we grow and develop is by experience and learning. And we've been given intellects, and we've been given souls, and we've been given minds, and we've been given all these spiritual helpers to guide this evolution and help us shift our identity away from more of our animal origin, let's say kind of lower, just survival self, to shift our identity more to our divine self, our soul self. And the more we shift our identity into our divine identity, that's when our spirit helpers can even work with us even more, because we've opened the channel wider for these spiritual influences to work with us, because we're not just living from our pure survival mode, the law of the jungle, all of that kind of stuff. No, we've grown. We've grown beyond that to where we can actually start being guided by the higher principles and values and spiritual laws. And talking about spirit helpers, again, according to this revelation, we have three main spiritual endowments. Every person has these. And the indwelling spirit of God is the first one I'll talk about. And I said earlier, it's a pure fragment of the universal Father within us. I love the way this is described. It is the spirit nucleus of our selfhood. Now, let me just digress here and say that if it's not already evident, my enthusiasm for this material, when the deeper I started understanding having a literal spirit nucleus within me, even though I've been studying and practicing and doing all of these different spiritual things for so many years, it wasn't until I came to this revelation and started going into this deep dive that God became more real. I became more real. The reality of God within me has become as real as, the toothbrush in my bathroom. That's a strange analogy, but it just popped into my head. It's like, this is real, folks. This is real. And it is co-creative. It is co-creative, and it's always there. And yes, it is pure love. And yes, it is pure mercy and guidance, but we're also asked to do our part. It's not lay on the couch and eat bonbons and let God do everything for you. Nope. It's a co-creative journey of co-creating ourselves with these spirit helpers. And then when Jesus went through the crucifixion, and when he ascended back to his domain as the creator of our universe, in the Bible, in the New Testament, it said, I will send you another comforter. And this is known in the Urantia Book as the Spirit of Truth. This is a direct gift, a spiritual piece of the Christ consciousness, if you will, if that's a more familiar term. And this spirit, I like to think of it, I really like to think of it as our really clear spirit of discernment. If we really ask our spirit of truth to be on all the time, it will help us know what's real, what's not real, what to do, what not to do, what's a better path and what's a better choice. And not that we won't, none of these spiritual helpers are here to make our life one of ease and, but what they're here to do is help us navigate all of the mortal human problems and challenges and joys with less fear and with more confidence and with more spiritual guidance, so that maybe we don't have to go down so many streets with potholes as we would have done before without all of this spiritual help. So the spirit of truth is a very intimate, close spirit for us to call on. And then the third spirit helper is from our universe mother spirit. So when Creator Jesus ascended back to his rightful place as the head of our universe, he'd always been co-creating with a mother spirit. So again, we've got a yin and a yang. We've got a yin and a yang. We've got the universe mother spirit of our local universe, co-creates, co-administers all the time, forever and ever, with the being, the creator son, who was known as Jesus here. That was his human name. He's called our creator son. And the Holy Spirit is from our mother spirit. And the Holy Spirit, the mother's the one that oversees all the angels and celestial personalities that do a lot of guidance in our everyday life. The angels are the ones that, tell you to go down a different street, and then you find out there was an accident on the other street you were going to take. They get very involved in our everyday, ordinary lives. So the indwelling spirit of God, the spirit of truth, and the Holy Spirit are three very present, very real spirits that work in a very unified way within us. And as we get to know each of them, we can have all three of them working in our lives much more fully, much more actively. Let's see here. I'm going to get a sip of water. I'll let you all take a break from my voice. So, most of us, when we hear the word religion, we think of an organized or an institutionalized path, which is exactly what it's become. Religion in the Urantia book is actually talked about a bestowal. It's a religious feeling that actually emerged way back from those primitive days where, primitive cavemen and women, Neanderthals, looked at the sun and said, "Oh, it gives us light and warmth. It must be God." Or the fire, it gives us light and warmth. We can cook our meat over it. That must be a God too. So all of these primitive things that have been worshipped over the many, many, many hundreds and hundreds of thousands of years that humanity's been on this planet have been nothing more than those calls for something to worship or to look at that's greater than ourselves, that has the ability to influence our destiny. And so that's more or less how religion is talked about in this book. I pulled a few quotes out. If you want to take just a minute to read them, if you haven't already done so, I'll give you just a minute of silence so you can take a look at them. So I want to highlight for a minute the next to the last one. The spirit of religion is eternal, which I just alluded to, but the form of its expression must be restated every time the dictionary of human language is revised. So what we're hearing and seeing a lot of, and it's been going on for several decades now, is a lot of people, when they're asked if they're religious, they say, "No, I'm spiritual, but I'm not religious." So I think we all here know that that is saying that not all, but a lot of our institutionalized and organized religions, even though they offer quite a lot of comfort and beauty and community to people, a lot of people are finding that it has stalled. It hasn't grown. It's sort of like all the dogma and all the beliefs have crystallized into this solid, unchanging form that isn't fitting who humanity is becoming. And that's a lot of why Spiritual Frontiers Fellowship has existed for 50 years. To offer, many different paths and perspectives on who we are, why we're here, and all the various different spiritual experiences that humanity has and can have. So, and the second one, conditions of living alter so rapidly that religion must accordingly quicken its adaptation to a new and ever-changing social order. Well, again, that's kind of bumpy, It's like, for me, it's like, a lot of new concepts about things I used to have very fixed in my mind when I started reading this book. They kind of bothered me, I felt that divine discontent. It's like, wait a minute, I don't know if, I still have a mind of my own, and I'm still not seeing this as an inviolate text that I can't question. But I got to tell you, the more I read, and the more from page 1 to 2097 is the most consistent. I've never found a contradiction. I've never found a statement that didn't have some element of truth, even when they say, this is as much as we know, and some parts of this were just is a supposition. The revelators are even willing to say You know, we don't exactly know how this process works, but this is as close as we can get to describing it to you. So the real religion, especially the religion that's affiliated with the religion of Jesus in part 4, is called the religion of personal experience. And one of my friends in the Urantia community has started a whole teaching module around ROPE, R-O-P-E, religion of personal experience. He's working with that concept. So, but we're social creatures, so we love to get together and share our spiritual. That's why we're here tonight. We like to get together as a community and share our spiritual urgings, longings, ponderings in a free, non-judgmental, open-minded way. And that's why some of these more crystallized, traditional paths aren't fulfilling the evolutionary spiritual growth that humanity has now stepped into. That's the easiest way I can say it. And that's one of the main reasons in 1955, in the early part of this 20th century, they knew that they could see the big picture. And they knew that we were going to need some type of a guidebook to help us understand who we really are, why we're really here, where we're headed, and to frame our lives in a much more universal, global, and cosmic frame of reference as to who we are in this bigger picture. And that's what this book does. If it does nothing else, it can expand your frame of reference about yourself, your life, God, humanity, the afterlife in a huge frame of reference. So it's really expansive, really expansive. This was an interesting one for me to put together. Prayer and worship. Everyone, I believe, has their own unique, personal, individual ways of doing this, and that is as it should be. I've called a few attributes of prayer and worship, again, according to this Urantia material. And I have used the word worship because they've made a distinction between meditation and worship. So let me speak to that first, because I've been meditating daily. I've skipped a few, but I've been meditating pretty much daily for 25 years. And I've got to give a lot of credit to my yoga path for the discipline of learning how to meditate, of learning how to still my body, and learning how to discipline my body and my mind to sit still long enough to let go of the monkey mind. So the path of yoga and the Eastern teachings really gave me a lot of techniques and discipline to meditate. But when I hit that wall back in 2020 and started reading this book, my meditations were like, why am I doing this? Okay, yeah, I can go in here and I can sit for 20, 30, 40, sometimes an hour and not move a muscle and come out feeling refreshed and relaxed. But it's like, what am I connecting with? So meditation is often thought of as a technique that can lead you to worship. Worship is defined here more as what we might call divine intercommunion. Okay, that just happens to be the word they chose to use. And they often talked about how Jesus took himself away very frequently from the crowds, from his apostles and his students. He had to take himself away. He often went up into a mountain or over by the Sea of Galilee, and he would just sit and he would go into communion with his Father within. And so when I started changing why I was doing my morning meditation, I realized what I was doing was I'm trying to actually open a channel within me to feel the presence of God, not a concept, not a word, not a theory, to actually feel the presence of God within me. And then let that presence permeate me more and more and more, grow my soul so that I live more and more identified with my soul, identified with my God nature. That's the whole bottom line. I really could stop there and have said a lot for tonight. But worship is, as you can see, refreshment for the soul. Yes, it is a form of meditation to quiet us down. It's for personal communion with God. It's for its own sake. It doesn't have a goal. It doesn't have a, we're not trying to reach a goal and tick off a box that we've done it. It's resting in the embrace of divine presence. It is receptive and reflective. Some of you all may have heard of centering prayer or contemplative prayer. That's a little closer to worship than meditation. It's effortless attention. It's the finite identifying with the infinite, as I just said. And prayer isn't just petitioning God for things like Santa Claus, please bring me this for Christmas. That can be done, but according to, in my opinion, these higher teachings of prayer from the Urantia material, prayer is more of a, well, we've often heard prayers talking to God, meditations listening, and that's not too far from what this is. But prayer is also a way of, prayer can be praise, it can be gratitude. It can be offering the upliftment of one of our loved ones that's having a challenge. I don't pray for outcomes anymore. I don't pray for someone to be healed. I don't pray for someone to have $1 million drop into their lap. Those are actually very shallow prayers to me now. What I pray for is the ability to be changed or to have my friend changed into what they need to effect these different changes in their outer circumstances. Because all of our outer circumstances change when we change inside. We all know that. That's almost a fact of life now. So prayer is also associated with faith. Do we have faith that there's someone listening? Do we have faith that we're being heard? Do we have faith that someone cares to hear our prayers? We can talk to God as intimately as we can talk to our best friend. I used to think I had to be all pious and, a few weeks ago I said, I'm having a rough one, I need to vent. And right now you're the only one around to listen. So I vented. And I'm sure God smiled. So prayer is not for self alone. It often says that Jesus rarely prayed for himself. His prayers, he was a little bit evolved, but his prayers were often not for himself alone. They might have included himself, he might have included himself, but really his prayers were for his friends. His prayers were for those that were still, living in spiritual darkness. And so prayer in the Urantia book is often thought of as something that becomes more and more selfless. I think that's quite beautiful. I've been very inspired by that. And then the last little sentence I put down here, which again, I think most of us on this gathering tonight know this, but regular and consistent prayer, worship, contemplation, or centering are essential for enlarging our spiritual receptivity capacity. And that's another thing that I hadn't really thought about when I was, quote, meditating, is that the more the analogy that comes to me sometimes is like a dry field that needs water. And there's this big old beautiful river, a couple of miles away, but we've got to dig some irrigation ditches to get that water into our dry field, right? So the more we pray, the more we worship, the more we meditate, if you want to call it that, that's fine. The more we tune in to the divine within us and let it inform us, we are widening those irrigation channels. So we are actually literally increasing our spiritual receptivity capacities. That's been a game changer for me. That's been a game changer. And it's been a life changer for me as well. It doesn't mean I still don't have problems and challenges. Yes, but I face them with a whole different, I see them through a shifting lens, as one of my dear friends calls it. So let's move on. I think I'm going to be able to cover quite a bit of this and have maybe a little extra long break. I'm not sure, but let's see here. So yes, Jesus. I've given you a few hints about how the Urantia book presents Jesus to us. I think one of the more challenging things for very, very traditional mainstream Christians, be they Protestant or Catholic, is probably well, maybe two theological points that might be very challenging that your Urantia book has changed is, first of all, Jesus was born in the normal way. His mother and father got together, they conceived a child, and he was born because he chose to have a fully human experience when he came here, from birth all the way up until when he left. He had powers at his disposal, but he also chose not to use them many times. He used them a few times that we know about, but he chose to go through life and live as a mortal of the realm. So it was not an immaculate conception, according to this material. And his crucifixion was not an atonement, to pacify an angry God. His crucifixion was sadly one of the worst ways a person could be punished. It was a Roman tradition, and he was he was radically scaring the established community of the priesthood of the Israelites. He was scaring them because he was saying, I'm trying to set people free, and you're trying to bind them up with your religions and your traditions, and I'm trying to set them free and tell them they can go directly to God. They were scared. We kind of all know the story if you've any Christian theology at all, but he chose to make his way all the way through and actually go through what any other man or prophet or teacher of his day that threatened the establishment so much would have gone through. And some of you know about his prayer in the Garden of Gethsemane when he knew what he was going to be facing the next day. And that was the one time that he really showed his human fear and was really questioning whether or not he wanted to proceed and go through with it. But he had an epiphany. He communed with the Father, and he made the choice to say yes to actually going through that, but not to atone for our sins, and not to atone because we were all bad people and he had to shed his blood for us. That I was taught that my whole life growing up in church. I had to wrestle with that a little bit, but I've come a long way because his life was so amazingly beautiful. So some of you all are probably reading this and not listening to me, and that is wonderful. I won't read them all out, but his mission, really his main mission in this seventh bestowal on our planet, he'd revealed the Holy Spirit on one planet, he'd revealed the eternal Son on a planet. He came here to reveal the Father. So when we read about the life of Jesus and the way he treated people, the way he interacted with people, his wisdom, his love, his compassion, his completely balanced personality, he was revealing the actual nature of the Creator Father to his mortal children. He also demonstrated in a human life what it was like to live completely as one who has consecrated their will to the doing of the Father's will. We have free will, totally, but we get to choose if we want to do it in concert with God or not. For me, God's will is a lot higher than mine. It's a lot wiser than mine, so bring it on. He wanted to exalt love, and they talk a lot about love as being basically truth, beauty, and goodness. It's a divine ideal. It's not the Hallmark version of Hallmark Channel version of love. It's the big love. To impart a new capacity. Again, he was trying to enlarge our spiritual capacities by everything he shared. He wanted to inspire us to become perfect. The Father was always saying, be like me, be like me, be like me. And to liberate our spiritual nature and heal our souls. The religion of Jesus, not about Jesus, Basically, it can be summed up in this phrase. Jesus came to teach the fatherhood, the universal fatherhood of God, and the reality of the brotherhood and sisterhood of humanity. So if we have a common parent, if we choose to believe we have one common parent, that really makes us all siblings, doesn't it? Siblings don't always get along with each other. So there's our next growth level, is to try to look at my sibling with love when my sibling is, rubbing me the wrong way, and go, can I see God in you? Yeah, we could also ask our sibling, help me understand why your behavior is so challenging right now. Help me understand. What are you going through? Are you hurting? Are you scared? Are you just taking it out of me because you're really scared? I'm here to listen. Jesus said, when you understand the motivations of your brothers and sisters, you can love them a lot easier. How do you understand the motivations? You have to ask questions. You can't just turn away and give them the cold shoulder. A little bit of challenge there to grow up, right? So his religion was a religion of the spirit, not the mind. Again, not intellectual dogma. It's the living water. It's the living water of spirit that informs us all the time. So it's alive. It's not dogmatized. It's not crystallized. It's a living spiritual communion that helps us all the time with every breath. He talks about unity, but not uniformity. Interesting distinction. His religion was active participation of mind and soul in the faith adventure of progressive human experience. It requires effort and determination. And of course, we heard a lot, the kingdom of heaven is within you. Yep. He didn't like the word kingdom, by the way, but that was a very understandable word back in 1st century AD. They understood everybody had kingdoms and kings and, warlords and all of that. He would have preferred to call the kingdom of God the family of God. I love that word a lot better. But those that followed him a hard time giving up the word kingdom. He also spoke about the joy and liberty, the liberty of loving service. When we have so much divine love and gifts inside of us, it just naturally wants to be shared and given into the world in loving service. That's what real service is. No strings attached. You're doing it because you're giving from your overflow, not from your emptiness. And finally, again, this rocks the boat of institutionalized religions that say you could only get to God through a priest or through a rabbi or through a shaman, but the finding of God for, in, and of yourself. So it's a direct connection. It's a direct connection. So that's basically how the religion of Jesus is described in this book. He did not come here to institute Christianity. That is what happened. It's not bad. It's not wrong. Christianity has actually, for the most part, kept some of his main teachings alive, thank goodness. It's just when it got too institutionalized, politicized, even secularized, it started straying from his real mission. And this is interesting. I think I mentioned earlier, he initiated a women's corps. He initially called 10 women that showed an interest, that had been hanging around and listening to him all this time. It was one of the most socially and culturally radical acts he ever did in the Middle East in the 1st century, okay? They were trained to lead and teach, and then they themselves actually trained another 70 to join them as their numbers grew. This was a huge radical thing that he did, because women were, and sadly in a lot of cultures, still considered not even second-class citizens, and with some exceptions back in the Palestinian area, and I say that Palestine in the antiquity of Palestine was, women weren't ever allowed, to be in the synagogue. They had to be in a special place. But we kind of know all the history of women being, they were property a lot of the times. So this was radical. This was radical. Yeah. You can read some of these. He authorized women to effect their own organization. They were given some initial funds. I thought this was interesting to get started, and then they furnished their own funds. So they had their own money, some way or another. And he actually, this is a direct quote from the Urantia book, the last one. The charge which he gave them was the Emancipation Proclamation, which set free all women for all time. No more was man to look upon woman as his spiritual inferior. Still working on that in some areas, but I'll tell you what, that was his intention anyway. And unfortunately, this was a real hard one to keep going in motion, because again, the thinking of the day, was that women it was just so hard culturally and socially for men to see women as their equals in many areas, but particularly spiritually. So this was radical. I had to put this in here. I had to. I told you these slides were a little bit text heavy, but just again, I'm going to be quiet for a minute and just take a look at this slide. This is directly from the Urantia material about how they say what happens right after our physical death. One I'm going to point out, which I just recently had a real aha moment about, is some of us, again, depending on your religious background, some of us have heard, in my father's house there are many mansions. There are literally 7 worlds that are our first 7, I guess you'd call them training spheres. If we choose, by the way, we have a choice to keep on going or not, or we can just not exist anymore. The hell thing is not in here. But if we choose to go on and keep growing and evolving as a personality, one of the first things that happens is all of the deficient, incomplete, and troubling life experiences we've had here will get rectified. I find that so uplifting that, and by the way, we're only going to take with us what is of true spiritual value. So a lot of the things we think are fears, regrets, traumas, a lot of that's going to die with our mortal mind, but with our literal mortal mind. Our soul is only going to carry that which is of spiritual value to go to the next realm. But we will actually have, maybe we should call it rehabilitation, but it's not because we've been bad. It's because a lot of us just didn't, we're still a very immature, unevolved planet. So our parenting, everything for a lot of us, not all of us, but some of us was just real off kilter. That's all going to be rectified. So I find that very, very enlightening. So I'm going to go on because I'm almost near the end. Good timing. So I made this slide just to give us kind of a place to start wrapping up. Oh, sorry about that. There we go. Our challenge, well, I keep doing that, sorry. The religious challenge of this age is to those far-seeing and forward-looking men and women of spiritual insight who will dare to construct a new and appealing philosophy out of the enlarged and exquisitely integrated modern concepts of cosmic truth, universe beauty, and divine goodness. And, that might sound a little esoteric and existential and philosophic, but when you narrow that lens down to each one of us having and again, I'm talking to the choir here, I know, with all of you that are here, but our challenge today, and they call it the religious challenge, again, religion in the way of direct guidance from God. That's the religion of the spirit, okay? Not the religion of the institution. Our challenge is to dare to construct a new and appealing philosophy of living out of enlarged and integrated, more modern concept of cosmic truth, universe beauty, and divine goodness. That's why they gave us 2,097 pages of us trying to understand our origins, our history, and our destiny, both on this literal planet, in our local universe, in our super universe, and all the way out to the edges that we can barely comprehend. But it actually goes through all of that. So we will have an enlarged concept of who we are, why we're here, and where we're headed. And I didn't touch on too much about what I had promoted about sin and suffering, or base evil and suffering. I'm just going to say one sentence about that, because that could be a whole different gathering. But basically, hundreds of thousands of years ago, the local administrator of our universe decided that he didn't need God anymore, that he could rule himself, and that God was a myth, and the Creator's Son was a myth, and he decided that self-will was more important than divine will. That sounds familiar? And he actually, because he went so far out of the divine plan of the cosmos, he went into what he called rebellion. He took our local universe into rebellion, and he went to every planet, and he tried to get the administration of each planet to join his rebellion. Unfortunately, the planetary administrators of our planet back then joined the rebellion, and that actually has delayed our evolution. If we hadn't joined the rebellion, we would be living on, today our Earth would probably look more like heaven on earth. But that's the quick way of saying that our planet in the cosmos went into rebellion. Our planetary administration decided to say, God, we don't need you. We're going to do this on our own. And they couldn't do it on their own. And so sadly, we've inherited some of that legacy of the delayed development. This book was given to kind of catch us up the best they can right now, to get us. That's why things are happening so fast. That's why there's so many changes, and they're trying to give us a bigger view so we can kind of catch up and get back on the train. So that's our challenge and opportunity. Our joy and our gift is the fact that God is love. And as this divine love finds expression in our lives, we will yield its fruits: spiritual joy, cosmic wisdom, intellectual peace, social progress, and moral satisfaction. And here are some resources. And if you want to take a screenshot or do something like that, I also warmly invite you to email me, and I will email you this page. There are a lot more, but these are the basic Urantia websites, foundations, administrations, and organizations. I want to point out, it's 8:24, I've got 1 minute. I want to point out the last thing I put on here. Some of you, my friends that are on here, know about this, but Urantia University is an exquisite website to go to. They offer, by the way, all these things are offered free, folks. This whole organization is pretty much run by people that just are volunteers. It's unbelievable. But every Sunday at 1 o'clock Eastern time, the Urantia University has started something called Homecoming. It's a spiritual family gathering. The moderator, the facilitator, is a Urantia book reader and teacher. He's one of my mentors, but he absolutely wants this to be for non-Urantia book readers. He's trying to use less and less Urantia language and really just have a place we can gather as a spiritual community who believe in God, want to know more about our spiritual development. So I put that on there. And one last thing I'll say is the reason I'm so involved with Urantia University is because last fall I entered a year-long teacher education program to learn to actually teach and share the Urantia book. And you are my first opportunity to do it publicly. So I am so honored and so thankful that Spiritual Frontiers reached out to me to do this because, like I say, this was a challenge, but when Eileen called me a few months ago, everything in my body said, yes, do it. And anyway, here I am, and I'm so honored that you chose to be here tonight. Some of you may have not stayed, but I can't see everybody, but thank you. And I am available. We don't have an in-person study group here in the Triangle yet. I feel like that might be one of my callings in the near future. But if you want to discuss the book at all, call me, write to me. I don't have my phone number, but please email me and we'll connect. And I'll help you in any way I can if you have an interest in connecting a little more deeply with the Urantia book. Thank you so much. Namaste.
You can unshare that if you don't mind. And I just wanted to take a moment to say thank you so much before we go to our break. And thank everybody, if you could just give Sharrie a nice hand.
Oh,
and
thank you.
Thank you for sharing.
I know I threw a lot at you. I know it was a lot, and believe me, I hope you found a few nuggets of interest. So thank you. You know, one of my dear mentors, who's an exquisite teacher and had been reading this book 50 years, he wanted me to remind everyone tonight that Jesus actually came here. Jesus is a universal teacher, and the hard thing is to separate him from Christianity. It's not, you don't have to, but this book is trying to help us see Jesus as a universal teacher of spiritual truth, not necessarily affiliated with any religion or organization. And I just want to make sure that that gets out there because, you know, that's a journey unto itself, especially for me who was, you know, raised with Christian roots. And it's actually refreshing to me. It's refreshing and it's expansive to me to see him in a whole new light, and all these other 2000 and some things in the book. So and
have a good night.
Thank you, Spiritual Frontiers, and everyone. Much love to all.